Hi everyone, my name's Anthony Cummins, and if you're unaware, I'm an author with Tuttle, and Tuttle and I do a series of reviews on their books. And today we're doing Photography in Japan, 1853 to 1912 by Terry Bennett. It is unfortunately in paperback, which is not a massive problem, but still, you know, I do like hardback. I'm not sure if the hardback version is still available, but they've sent me the paperback one. However, it's a wonderful book. Straight off, it is gorgeous. The pictures, of course, are either in colour or black and white, depending. Both are in there, which is really nice. Most of them, of course, are of the old school, you know, hand-coloured. But what I'm going to do is go through my favourite photos, and we will then, I'll put them on the screen here for you, and we'll go through them. And you can get a good idea of what's in the book. What I really enjoyed about this book actually is it's not just a collection of photographs. You think, collection of photographs. It's actually who took them, the story behind the photograph, how it affected Japan, what was happening in Japan. It is full of articles alongside the pictures, and they're a good read. So I definitely recommend it. The link, of course, is down below in the information box. You can follow on. First one is this one, which is Commodore Perry. Now, Commodore Perry is the guy who opened the gateway to Japan, and that's actually the guy, his portrait of him going to Japan in the time of the samurai, which is pretty impressive. Now, the next two are actually really wonderful and macabre. So they're actually of two dead Westerners. So the body of Lieutenant Camus, I think he's pronounced, and the body of assassinated Charles Lennox Richardson. Now, these were assassinated by samurai in the height of the "we hate white people" basically in Japan. If you're unaware, there was a point where basically being white and walking around Japan was a death sentence without bodyguards, and you're looking at the 1860s here because there was so much anti-foreign ideas. And even there is, if you look at my new book, which is called, it's called Old Japan, Stories from the Shores of the Samurai. There's a guy who commits suicide because the pressure is so much about being assassinated, so he was not happy. But what is interesting about these is the fact that it's just not clear enough, but you can see enough for it to give you an idea. And it's the idea is you can see katana wounds on these guys, and you're like, ah, okay. And that is actually real historical evidence of the wound patterns or the woundability of katana on real human bodies. I'm looking forward to seeing if there's more of these. Now, this next one is a portrait of Namura Gohachiro, which is in 1854, and it's considered the earliest picture of a samurai because it's the earliest picture. It's the first time photography came across, and I think it's the earliest one they can date. So there's nothing particularly special about this picture compared to the other one, but it's like that is the first time a samurai is snapped, allegedly. This next one is interesting because it's actually a capture of the Japanese guns at the lower battery. So basically you've got a load of British soldiers here, or sailors, and they have captured the gun position. Now, people forget that Western cannons already got to Japan, and that Japan did have cannons. From my research, it shows that the cannons actually deteriorated over time, and to the point where sometimes they just had false paper mache ones or even painted ones to show they had cannons, because they just didn't do it so much, and gunnery had taken such a fall in Japan. If you're unaware, gunnery was a massive thing in Japan up until basically the end of 1600, and they started to decrease it. And but we forget that it's very much like Western cannons at the time, because they imported them and then built them. So that's very interesting to see that the actual cannons being used in samurai times when the British came back across. This next one is decapitated heads of two so-called assassins. Now, this I say that because I'm a bit unsure, I need more research, but it seems that these are the two people that I wrote about in that book that I said before, the Old Japan, Stories from the Samurai, Shores of the Samurai. And what is amazing is it says, I think it's the same episode, where these two people tried to assassinate some delegates, and they were executed for it. But the problem I've got is the personal account I've got is from somebody else, but they are accused of trying to assassinate another person. But I think it's the same episode because all the delegation was there together, but I've got two accounts of it. So the names of the delegation or the people in the galaxy can change, but I think it's the same episode told from two accounts. So it's really good to have read about this account and then see the actual faces of the young, they're really young actually, or they appear to be young, assassins or would-be assassins that alleged they were Ronin. This next one's interesting. It's actually a decapitated head in an execution ground, and you can see there, if you look to the left, is the criminal capture tools. For all the Natoryu students and Book of Samurai followers, there it is, the 3 tools of criminal capture. So that's really quite interesting to see, and they're on display saying, basically, if you see this, you know, we're gonna get you. And you forget Japan was a rough, hostile place. Right, this next one's interesting. It's basically a house for some Frenchmen. And as you can see, it's got 2 sets of medieval Western armour with medieval Western emblems at the top and pole arms going through it. And they must have imported these to Japan in the 1800s, which is well out of the time they were being used, to show prestige about their armour and their history. Because remember, back in the late 1800s, you're still in a very, maybe not in French aristocratic times. I'm not quite sure of the date of Marie Antoinette, but I'm sure she's before this. But the point is that they've got this idea of putting out stately things outside their residence. In the time of samurai, we're still using arms and armour of the same type, but actually the Westerners were well beyond it at that point, which is quite bizarre, I think. This next one's quite interesting because it's an actual photograph of original Ainu. If you don't know who Ainu are, they're the actual original inhabitants of Japan, or one of the main original tribes, and they are in the north. Now these 2 women, you can see they've got long tashes on, tattoos or paintings over their faces, and it shows they're very different to the standard Japanese of the time. So guys, following on from the Ainu, here's a male Ainu figure. So these guys have a totally different culture to the Japanese, and they are the original people, and it's just interesting that there's not much done about them, and they still exist today as a social group, if you like, or an ethnic group, and they are still about. So, but I think they're pretty much mixed in to Japanese society nowadays. I must admit, I'd like to track down and go and see some of the original Ainu. Right guys, this one is very interesting for me because it shows you what, in the ninja research world, people say people wouldn't wear a ninja mask in the middle of like Japan, it'd be too obvious. Well actually that's not true. Wearing a ninja mask is quite a correct thing to do and blend in Japan. Ninjas didn't wear ninja masks for the reason that there was no need for them up until like the Edo period when they become thieves. But actually the idea that there's, you know, people don't wear masks in Japan so you'd stand out, that's not true. They did wear masks in Japan. And this image is of 2 women wearing masks in the street, which is very nice. I love it. This is absolutely Japanese, isn't it? And the last image I'm going to show is this one, which is basically American soldiers giving water to Japanese soldiers in China in 1900. So the Chinese are doing some wars. It's got the information about the battle there, and there's an American who's giving water to a wounded Japanese soldier. So the idea of the Japanese and the American soldiers working together is pretty much shattered after World War II, wasn't it, really? And then obviously, you know, now the Japanese Defence Force works in support of the American forces. So, but it was just interesting to see. So guys, that is this one, which is photography in Japan 1853 to 1912. It gives you a wonderful overview of Japan in the late 1800s, and it lets you see into the heart of what it was like in samurai times. Of course, we can't get back to Sengoku period because cameras were not invented then, but we do have this period here. So remember, this is by Tuttle. It's there. It's Tuttle is one of the publishers I deal with. They do a great array of books on Japan. So click the link below. Get yourself a copy, guys. It's a very interesting book. Of all the ones I've been asked to review, this is actually genuinely very interesting.